Coming to paperback and Kindle Unlimited, Isis, All That Glitters. The goddess next door takes on a bikini-clad bank robber in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, All That Glitters in paperback and Kindle Unlimited this March. I was watching a video on Bleeding Fool where they were talking about some of the reasons why Dan Didio and Jim Lee were not let go in the layoffs that were a part of restructuring DC Comics. And after listening to the arguments presented and watching Ethan Van Sciver's video where he talked about how Dan Didio was the only thing keeping DC cohesive, I'm going to have to disagree with both of their analyses. And the reason why I'm going to disagree with their analyses is because as a publishing professional with over 20 years in the business as a writer and over 15 years as a publisher, I believe the reason why Warner Brothers won't let Dan Didio go and Jim Lee go is because they are afraid of taking the DC brand in the direction that it needs to go in. Because as I see it right now, your Dan Didio is one of the toxic people who has been derailing the DC Comics brand, and many of the people at Warner Brothers, they're just too cowardly and afraid to take the risk and go out here and try to find a qualified publishing professional. So they still stay in this codependent relationship with your Dan Didio and Jim Lee and allow them to completely derail the DC Comics brand. Now, when it comes down to your Dan Didio has had over 15 years at DC, and in the over 15 years he's been at DC, he has taken a brand that was incredibly competitive before he was in charge of it and turned it into a brand that is now literally unsellable at comic shops. And he has failed not only once, but he has failed 3 times at DC. He failed when he entered DC in 2002, when he started derailing the DC brand with storylines like Graduation Day, Identity Crisis, Infinite Crisis, and this is the man who had a list of characters he wanted to kill, such as popular characters like Nightwing, who was a fan favorite of comic fans for years, and Dick Grayson is considered to be the number 3 character at DC, but because he didn't like Nightwing and he did not like legacy characters like Wally West's Flash or many other legacy characters, he decided that he wanted to kill these characters off, even though they were part of DC's organic history. Now, your Didio's decisions led to the complete decline of DC Comics and led to the complete decline in sales of DC Comics, which led to the penultimate climax, which was him ending the DC Universe in 2011, the post-crisis DC Universe, and then ushering in the New 52. Now, the New 52 was a complete and utter disaster that literally not only derailed the DC Comics publishing division, but it also derailed the DC brand as related to licensing and merchandising, because as DC tried to launch products like action figures and other merchandise, they found themselves unable to even reach those customers who had been alienated by years of Dan Didio's stories where he wound up murdering characters in the classic DC universe and then ending the DC universe and replacing it with this so-called edgy and angsty New 52 universe. Now, the DC brand went into an incredibly steep decline where not only, again, were comic sales dropping to all-time lows, but merchandising as well, because when it came down to DC merchandise like action figures, it literally rotted on the shelf ever since it went into the New 52 direction your Dan Didio led the brand in. And your Jeff Johns desperately tried to fix DC after the failure of several movies that were part of that direction with Rebirth. Unfortunately, after your Jeff Johns was taken over to another division, your Dan Didio was put back in charge of DC, and we started to see the decline happen again once he became the co-publisher and leader of DC, with events like Batman 50, Your Heroes in Crisis, and the complete collapse of Superman and the hiring of Brian Michael Bendis. Now, many people would sit there and say there are no qualified individuals to take on the co-publisher and editor-in-chief position, and I have to disagree with that. I myself am qualified to be someone who should be considered for the co-publisher and editor-in-chief position at DC Comics. I mean, I have over 10 years of experience running the SJS Direct imprint. I have thousands of sales not only in the US and abroad, and I have a love for DC Comics and DC Comics characters, and I want to, if I were to get that job, I would want to try to bring the DC brand back to what it was and give readers all of the action and adventure they used to enjoy at DC Comics, and also give them the hope that DC heroes are known for. And this is the big problem at DC Comics, is that we're not getting that hope and optimism, and we'll never get that hope and optimism as long as Dan Didio is in charge of DC Comics. And Warner Brothers needs to realize that sometimes you just have to let a toxic person go if you hope to make changes, because your Warner Brothers says they want to change DC's direction, but you will never change DC's direction unless Warner Brothers has the courage to go out here and try to hire that publishing professional. Now, many people believe that DC Comics would suffer because they would replace that individual with a so-called SJW, and that person would push leftist politics. But I believe that there are people out there like myself who are qualified to be the editor-in-chief at DC Comics. I believe that there are people out here with the passion for DC superheroes, the passion for DC's legacy storytelling, and the passion for telling stories about characters like the Superman family and the Batman family, and somebody who has a background in publishing to understand that a engaged reader is one who loves the characters, loves the product, and that concepts like Dan Didio has implemented, like making readers angry to engage them, just don't work. So, as I see it, there is a person out there who can run DC Comics, but the problem is Warner Brothers just doesn't have the courage to go out here and seek out that person. Much like a codependent person in a codependent relationship, they would rather sit there and take Dan Didio's abuse rather than let him and Jim Lee go and then go out here to try to find a person who truly does have the passion for comics, passion for the craft of comics, and love for the characters to do these characters justice and treat these characters with the respect they deserve. And that type of person with that publishing background and publishing experience is someone that DC Comics needs, and that person, like myself, has been out there for years and wants to be a part of fixing the DC universe and getting those sales numbers up so that readers of the next generation can enjoy these characters the way previous generations enjoyed them. Unfortunately, everyone is too scared at Warner Brothers and DC to go out here and take the time to go out here and make those painful decisions, because if they had a true leader at DC Comics, the brand could grow, the brand could thrive, but they just don't have the courage to go out here and do what needs to be done. When it comes down to toxic people like your Dan Didio, your Jim Lee, your Bob Harris, and writers like your Tom King and your Brian Michael Bendis, they have clearly shown that they are toxic people, and they suck the energy and resources out of a company like DC Comics. And every minute that you have this person working at your company is a minute that they further drive your brand and your business into decline. So cutting this person off is the best thing to do. And while it may be painful in the beginning to do such a thing, like firing your Dan Didio or your Jim Lee and your Bob Harris and ending the contract of your Brian Michael Bendis and your Tom King, it may be painful in the beginning, but the growth that could transpire afterward could lead to serious changes for the better for everyone. Just like dealing with an abusive boyfriend or an abusive husband, terminating a toxic boss may be painful for a company in the beginning because they may fear the lack of leadership. But once you bring a new individual in and they bring in that positive energy, they can take that brand and take it to another level. And that's what I would want to do if I had an opportunity to take the job as the co-publisher and editor-in-chief at your DC Comics, because I want to bring that type of passion and energy and that love for these characters back into the DC offices, and I want to bring that passion and love back to the pages of DC Comics, because DC Comics, as I see it, is all about hope and optimism. It's about heroes overcoming in the face of the greatest adversity and inspiring others to be their best, because characters like Superman, they are about inspiring hope, and characters like Batman are about inspiring hope in the darkest of days. So I want to see brightness, fun, energy, and fun come back to DC Comics. And they're sitting there saying they're afraid of firing Dan Didio, when I say, yeah, go ahead and fire him, Jim Lee and Bob Harris, and let's get the toxic energy out of DC Comics so that the positive energy of another seasoned publishing professional with trade publishing experience can come in, and they can start teaching all of these comic pros how the trade publishing business works, how to reach new audiences in platforms like digital publishing, where I have over a decade of experience in, and the whole new marketplace of distribution of print on demand, so that we can walk away from obsolete distributors like Diamond Comics distributors and start dealing with distributors like Amazon and Lightning Source, who are the future of trade publishing. Because as I see it, the whole thing as relates to DC Comics is that they need a seasoned publishing professional with trade and digital publishing experience to run the DC Comics brand. They need someone with a passion and love for comics, and they need someone who cares about the characters and the catalog to preserve the mission of DC Comics, the values of DC Comics, and everything that these heroes stand for. We don't have that person with Dan Didio in charge right now, and Warner Brothers needs to understand that they can't be cowards if they want to save the DC brand. They have to have the courage to do what is right for the brand, and the right thing to do if you're going to try to restructure this brand so that it can become competitive again is getting rid of all of the toxic people at DC Comics, because when you look at the problem, it's not being solved, yet you fired a seasoned art director with over 23 years who loved the characters, but you kept toxic people like your Dan Didio, your Jim Lee, and your Bob Harris, and that does not help you increase your sales of DC Comics, because as I see it right now, the wrong people left DC Comics, and until they get that seasoned publishing professional with publishing experience in trade publishing, we will not see anything change as related to DC Comics, and all we're going to see is the same vicious cycle repeat itself for a couple of years, where they get things right with something like Rebirth, then go right back to the same dark, toxic model that has been destroying DC Comics ever since 2002, when your Dan Didio came on as the editor-in-chief at DC Comics and then was made co-publisher because he had no publishing experience, and the other person who had publishing experience, Jim Lee, bankrupted his own publishing brand, Wildstorm. So you really need a seasoned publishing professional to come in here and get DC Comics straight and get DC Comics focused on crafting storylines that fit the DC Comics model, the true DC Comics model that was established back in the days of the 1950s, I believe, of the Silver Age, and the DC Comics brand of post-crisis DC, one of the most productive and successful periods, which was run by your Jeanette Kahn. We need somebody who has that type of vision, and a vision to take the DC brand into the 21st century, where we can start using technology like digital publishing to reach younger readers, and print-on-demand technology and new distribution models to keep the older backlist catalog intact and allow comic shops to be able to return products that don't sell and get credit for new products that do sell. And also, you need a publishing professional to do something like seriously prune that publishing catalog, because right now DC publishes way too many titles, and while your Didio believes 52 titles are enough, Shawn only believes that DC only needs 24 regular titles, because when it comes down to comics, people should be able to go into a comic shop and buy all of the books in a catalog in a month with just a $100 bill or a $50 bill at best. And when you have a catalog that is too big, you have too many books chasing too few readers, and that's not good for business. So you definitely need a publishing professional to show you how to have a lean, mean catalog that has readers chasing the books, and you need a publishing professional to be able to launch new books that will be able to get the build-up that will allow them to find an audience. Because as I see it right now with DC and Marvel right now especially, they are launching books but without a marketing plan or a business plan or even a plan to target certain audiences, and that's why it's hard to sell many new books like your Silencers and your Terrifics, and it's hard to sell older established books like your Supermans due to the constant rebooting and then hiring of talent like your Brian Michael Bendis, who have proven that they just can't sell books. So as I see it, everybody in the comic book industry and Warner Brothers, they're just too afraid to do what needs to be done. And what needs to be done is the painful decision to say it's time to let Dan Didio go and move DC forward. And while moving forward is scary and you're entering the unknown, when you have a seasoned publishing professional to take you in that direction, it makes it less scary because you can trust that person to move you forward, because the further away you get from the toxicity, the further you can get to the positivity. And once you get to the positivity, then you can change DC and the mood and tone related to DC and get people excited for DC Comics again. Now that's what I would want to do as an editor-in-chief at DC Comics, is get people excited about DC Comics, get people excited about DC heroes, and share my love of DC Comics and DC Comics characters, because I have loved these characters ever since I was 4 years old, and I want to continue sharing those characters with readers for the next generation. One of the things that inspired me to become a writer was comic books, and I want to see the medium survive so that the next generation of kids can enjoy them. So you have all these people saying that DC and Warner Brothers would get an SJW to run their comics. No, I say if they were smart, they would look at someone like myself and try to consider them for the editor-in-chief position, because you need someone who cares about the characters, cares about the brand, and has a passion for the brand to run it, and run that brand so that publications can find themselves in the hands of readers in paper format or in digital format that they read on their iPads, their smartphones, their Kindles, or whatever reading device they want to read. That's what DC needs right now, and sadly everyone is too afraid to take a risk to try to find that individual, when if they had the courage to go out and step on faith, they could have that individual working for them and that person could start moving the DC brand forward and move that brand towards taking itself to the next level. That's what I want to do if I were to work for DC Comics, is work towards taking that brand to that next level, the same way I'm trying to take the SJS Direct brand to the next level, and get those products out there so that people can see what's great about DC superheroes and what's great about DC Comics. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com, where you can find the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, the Temptation of John Haynes, and the Spinsterella trilogy. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.